Nobody in that hall expected the Duke to look twice at her. She was standing at the edge of the room, in a blue dress that nobody had picked for her. She had chosen it herself. Her hands were folded quietly in front of her. Her eyes were low, and every single person in that grand wedding hall had already decided she didn't matter. But the Duke hadn't decided anything yet. Her name was Clara, and the woman in the pink dress, standing just a few steps closer to the center of everything, that was her sister, Vivienne. Vivienne was beautiful in the way that rooms notice. Golden hair, soft smile, the kind of face that painters spent their whole lives trying to remember. Their father, a silver-haired man named Edmund, had built his entire plan around Vivienne. He had rehearsed it, polished it. He knew exactly what he was going to say. What he didn't know was that Clara had been watching all of it. For years, the hall was full of white flowers and whispered conversations. Gold chairs lined in perfect rows. Guests dressed in their finest. All of them waiting, not for a wedding exactly, but for something close to it. A presentation, an introduction, the kind of formal meeting that in their world meant everything about a woman's future would be. Decided in a single afternoon, Duke Nathaniel had arrived exactly on time. He was tall, dark-haired, serious in a way that wasn't cold, just careful. He walked with the weight of someone who had learned, very early, that every room he entered would immediately want something from him. He was used to being studied. He had learned to study back. Edmund moved forward the moment Nathaniel stepped inside. "Your Grace," Edmund said, his voice warm and practiced, one hand already gesturing toward Vivienne. "May I present my daughter?" "Not daughter's daughter." Clara stood 3 steps behind. She did not move. She did not flinch. She had heard this before, this particular grammar, the singular form that quietly erased her. She had been erased so many times that she had stopped expecting anything different. But she kept her eyes open. Now here is the moment that changes everything. And it happened so quietly, you almost miss it. Nathaniel looked at Vivienne. Of course he did. Everyone did. She was lovely, gracious, and she smiled at him with the practiced warmth of someone who had been told, her whole life, that her smile was her greatest gift. He smiled back, politely. And then his eyes moved, past Edmund's gesturing hand, past the careful arrangement of the moment, and they landed, slowly, steadily, on Clara. She was looking at a white flower arrangement near the wall, not at him. She wasn't performing. She wasn't waiting to be seen. She was simply there, in her blue dress, existing in the way that people exist when they have stopped hoping to be chosen. Something about that stopped him completely. Edmund leaned slightly toward the Duke and lowered his voice. Not low enough. Clara heard every word. "Take the pretty one," her father said. "Vivienne is the one you want. She is accomplished, agreeable, everything a man in your position needs." Vivienne heard it too, a small, barely visible tightening around her eyes. She had been the pretty one her whole life. She had always thought that was a gift. In this moment, standing in a grand hall being offered like something on a shelf, it felt like something else entirely. Nathaniel looked at Edmund for a long, quiet moment. Then he said calmly, "Which one is the other daughter?" Edmund blinked. That is Clara. She is the younger one." "She is not." "Would you introduce me?" The hall didn't go silent. The guests were too far away, too busy with their own conversations. But in that small circle of 4 people, something shifted with the weight of a door slowly closing. Edmund introduced Clara with the tone of a man reading a footnote. Clara finally looked up. And here is what nobody had prepared for, and not Edmund. Not the guests, not even Clara herself. She looked at the Duke directly. Not shyly, not boldly, just honestly. The way someone looks at another person when they have nothing to perform and nothing to lose. Nathaniel said simply, "You weren't looking at me." Clara said just as simply, "You hadn't done anything worth looking at yet." Vivienne pressed her lips together to hide a smile. Edmund went very still. Nathaniel, for the first time in a very long time, laughed. Not the polite laugh he kept ready for social occasions. A real one, brief and surprised, like something that had slipped out before he could stop it. They were seated near each other for the afternoon gathering. Not because Edmund planned it that way, he most certainly did not. But Nathaniel had made a quiet request, and in this world, quiet requests from dukes were simply fulfilled. Clara did not try to impress him. She spoke when she had something to say. She was honest about the things she had read and curious about the things she hadn't. She disagreed with him once, clearly and without apology, about something small, a book. A question of character in a story. And she didn't walk it back when he pushed gently. He found this remarkable. Not because women never disagreed with him, but because they always apologized for it immediately afterward. Clara simply waited for his response. as if disagreement was a normal part of conversation and not a risk to be managed. By the end of the afternoon, Edmund had gone through 3 stages: confusion, quiet panic, and finally a stiff, forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Vivienne had gone through something different. She had watched her sister speak and laugh and simply be, without the performance, without the careful positioning. And she had felt something she hadn't expected to feel: relief, because Vivienne had never wanted this particular afternoon, this particular Duke, this particular future that her father had wrapped around her like a gift no one had asked her about. She had simply been too afraid to say so. Clara hadn't been afraid. Clara had simply been invisible, and in that invisibility, she had somehow remained entirely herself. 2 weeks later, Nathaniel sent a letter. It was addressed to Clara. Edmund held it in his hands for a long moment before bringing it to her. His face was a complicated landscape: pride and shame and something that looked almost like seeing her, maybe for the first time. She took the letter without a word. She read it alone by the window in the early morning light. It was not a dramatic letter. It did not promise grand things. It said that he had thought about their conversation more than once. It said he found her company genuinely interesting. It asked, carefully and without pressure, whether she might be open to meeting again, not as an arrangement, not as a presentation, but simply as 2 people who had found something worth continuing. Clara sat with it for a long time. She looked out the window at the pale winter sky. She thought about every room she had ever stood at the edge of, every introduction that forgot her name, every version of herself she had held quietly, patiently, alone, not because she was weak, but because she had never stopped believing that the right moment would eventually come. She thought, maybe this is it. Then she picked up her pen. She did not write dramatically. She did not write with the breathless relief of someone finally being chosen, after years of waiting. She wrote the way she had spoken to him that afternoon. Honestly, simply with a calm kind of warmth, she said yes, not because he was a duke, not because her father would finally see her, not because the world had finally turned in her direction after years of looking away, but because he had looked at her when he didn't have to, and she had looked back and found someone worth looking at. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply remain themselves, quietly and completely, in a world that keeps asking them to be less. Clara never tried to be chosen. She just never stopped being real. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered.